Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. What a week it was in the world of agriculture. We'll have conversations about all of that coming up here in just a moment. And now it's time to go between the rows with our friends from Pioneer. And this week we're taking a trip to Indiana, Fowler, Indiana, in the northwest part of the state. Clay Kritzmeyer and his family farm in that area. Clay, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, you bet. I'm looking forward to it.
So describe a little bit your farm operation for us. What do you guys raise?
My mom, dad, and I, we raise corn and soybeans here in Fowler and kind of the surrounding area. Go about our fields are about within a 30-mile range north to south. So corn and soybeans, been doing it my whole life alongside my parents. And then on the side, we raise some show livestock for 4-H purposes. I raise show pigs. Mom has a little flock of sheep, 30 head of Southdown ewes and a handful of show pig sows. So when the combine shuts off and we get all the groundwork, then it's a full go, farrowing and lambing. We stay busy all year round, but it's a lot of fun. All
right, got to keep that livestock happy. Let's talk about that growing season for you guys. Clay, what challenges did you encounter in Northwest Indiana this year?
You know, it was interesting. Last year was my first year farming, with my name actually being on the bills, I guess. And it was the driest that this area had been since the Dust Bowl. And I just kind of thought, what insane luck for my first year to be with those kind of drought conditions. This year was better. Planting conditions were very, very good. We were able to move quickly and get through everything pretty efficiently, which worked out well. We tried to get in early with the beans, and then so in turn we could get that stuff harvested early as well. Planting was good, and then really didn't have to deal with too much throughout the growing season. We could have used rains a little bit more often than they did, but right when it got crunch time to almost hitting the point of getting scary, we got enough of a shower just to get, I think, kind of increase our yield potential by just a scotch. And then yield monitors and things going across at the elevator. I do think that late rain helped us quite a bit.
That is nice to get that little fill out at the end of the season. Talk to me about what you planted on the farm this year. What Pioneer products did you use?
We've used all sorts of stuff, and working with Barry Tolan, a close friend, neighbor, and then our Pioneer dealer. Barry's always good about making sure that we can stay good with the consistent stuff, the stuff that's always helped us in years past, but always kind of also want to stay kind of on the cutting edge of things and trying the new things. So I tried the 13777 on a little bit of my ground and was impressed with that. And the 14830 was good stuff, as well as the 1742. Kind of the racehorse hybrids did well this year with our good growing conditions. But, the 13777, that was a new one that some of these guys were advising me to try, and I'm glad I did. I've been really pleased with everything on the corn and bean side.
And that 13777, that's that Power Core Enlist, is that right?
That is correct.
Now, I'm guessing that your local Pioneer team helped put you in touch with that Power Core Enlist. What's it been like working with that local team?
These Pioneer folks that we work with, they're sincerely looking out for the good of the farmer. I mean, because if the farmer goes broke, they lose a customer. So we got to make sure everyone takes care of each other. And the folks at Pioneer and Enlist, man, it's been phenomenal. They've been a great help, just kind of helping me all the way through, always answering questions, and then being good about staying on me, because during the summertime, it's hard to find time to go walk corn and just actually get into it, especially with the livestock production side of things. But they were good. Kind of went with me. We walked through fields together. So it's been a great experience.
It's fantastic. It's great to have a local team ensuring your success. Clay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this week.
Yeah, you bet.
And folks, you can always learn more at pioneer.com. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. It was a very busy week in the world of financial markets, and joining us this week to help make sense of what's happening in the world of commodities is Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor at Barchart. Darren, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
I appreciate you having me on, Mike. And as you said, what a week. What a week it was.
Certainly lots to watch. I think the headline from this week was the presidential election Tuesday night. Darren, no doubt you were watching the markets as those results were rolling in. What did you take away from the way the commodity complex traded through this year's presidential election?
Yeah, what was interesting to me was that immediately after the results were generally accepted and announced, we saw a complex-wide, commodity complex-wide sell-off. We saw large losses in gold and crude oil, energies, metals, grains, softs. It didn't matter where we turned. The only futures contracts that were higher were U.S. stock indexes, and that was followed up with the actual indexes when the markets opened on Wednesday. So, this was the knee-jerk reaction. And as we made our way through Wednesday's session, we saw some commercial buying coming back into some of these markets, particularly in the grains, which will be an interesting development to watch.
It was. And Darren, one that sort of surprised me at first blush was the rebound in soybeans from that 20-cent decline Tuesday night to up really on the week. And where is that optimism for soybeans coming from as we get some more clarity on what's happening here?
I don't think it's optimism. I think it's more panic, maybe fear, because I don't want to say that the world's largest buyer is afraid or is panicking, but it's certainly what it looks like when we see the market sell off. The world's largest buyer steps back in and starts covering some secondary supplies, and I think we're going to continue to see this through the end of December. Then once January comes around, some of this export interest, some of these export sales interests that we've been seeing, probably going to go away. It's going to go away for a while, and it'll be interesting to see what happens because then it comes down to weather and whether or not Mother Nature's kind to South America and Brazil's crop in particular.
That's true, Darren. All right. So if we see these exports, it sounds like trucking along until we get to some actual political change come beginning of the new year. Where do you think corn is going to be going in the short? We've seen these exports coming back. Is the risk to corn exports going away the same likelihood as it is for soybeans?
Yeah, here I think there is more of a fear factor, more of a panic issue with Mexico, being the main buyer, and as well as unknown destinations for what that's worth. So I do think there is some concern, and so I do think we are seeing, particularly Mexico loading up here early, and then that again could dry up. The last time around from 2016 to 20. We saw Brazil's northern ports, a lot of money poured into, rebuilding and building more more Brazilian northern ports to feed into Mexico, make it easier to ship into Mexico. It certainly looks like those are going to come back into play over the next few years.
Can ethanol pick up some more of this demand stagnation on the corn side? Darren, are you optimistic here for biofuels and what we're seeing?
I'm not. Last time around, we did see a lot of quote unquote hardship waivers given out to the petroleum industry, to refiners, and I think that's going to start up again. I think we're going to see more of that. So it's not necessarily bullish, the U.S. ethanol industry, and it certainly wasn't last time, and I don't know that it will be again.
Those are all good points. Lots to think about here as these things continue to shift in the world of politics. When we come back, we'll talk about interest rates, we'll talk about the broader market and what could be coming on the livestock side with Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor at Barchart. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone. And we're back talking markets with Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor at Barchart. And Darren, we talked a little bit about the election impact on the commodity markets pricing. I want to go bigger picture. Interest rates, inflation. Fed's Open Market Committee met this week. Traders were expecting a bit of a rate decline. Where do you think interest rates are headed medium term?
This is a great question. This would be a great debate over, a longer term debate, because I don't think it's going to change the Fed's opinion, at least through the end of 2024. And the market certainly pricing in, was pricing in a cut for the November round of meetings, and with the question being, it hasn't necessarily been pricing in a December cut, but it's close. But it's after we move forward from there, because all of a sudden, the discussion has now turned, inflation's going to heat up again. Tariffs, trade wars, the fact that the last time around when all of this stuff was initially put in place, the administration at that point threatened anyone who talked about interest rate increases with being fired and losing their position. So And now the situation could be made a bit worse than what it was back in 2016 to 20. So, I think inflation is a real issue, particularly if the Fed is not allowed to try to keep a lid on rising prices.
So we'll continue to watch. It sounds like there will be a lot of conversation about the Federal Reserve as we get into next week. Darren, another change we saw, or an intensification we saw over this past week, big picture, macro level stuff, was the value of the U.S. dollar. Dollar index surged this past week. What's the trader's mindset behind bidding up that dollar in this context?
Yeah, this one had me baffled starting, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. The fact that the U.S. dollar index rallied 2 full points. I'm going to say this was more of a knee-jerk reaction. It didn't really change anything because, again, the through the end of the year, we are still expecting, the interest rates not to do much. So that doesn't really provide support to the dollar, because the dollar should go up if the idea is interest rates are going to increase, and I just don't see that happening. But we also saw yields jump Tuesday night through Wednesday. So again, I'm going to set that as an outlier as far as the activity, and let's see what happens longer term as we make our way through the end of this year.
All right, we'll let the markets breathe a little bit. Darren, as we look at how Americans are feeling, we saw the S&P 500 Dow Jones move into record territory this past week. Is that good news for the cattle complex? We're going to see live cattle take out 200 anytime soon.
I don't think so. But again, I think it depends on once we get past the knee-jerk reaction in these markets and we settle down and things start to find their path again, find their way again. Will we be able to support these spike rallies to new all-time highs in stock indexes, and to the buying that we've seen in some of the livestock markets? To me, both still feel a bit heavy. Both still look a little bit top heavy. The stock indexes at the end of October, and certainly the cattle on their weekly charts. So to me, I think we're going to see increased pressure up here, and I think we could see stock indexes come down, and most likely we're going to see the cattle start to come off as well.
All right, lots to watch, Darren. Do you think that's going to start to unwind here in the first quarter of 2025?
I think so. If not here at the very end of the last quarter of 2024, I still think there's a possibility. I mean, we could still see the S&P 500 close lower for this month. There's a lot of month left here in November, so I think it could still close lower this month and then start to work lower in December. If it doesn't, then that maybe it does push it back into the first quarter of 25.
Okay. All right. Boy, things are uncertain in the markets. Keep an eye on how these things are changing. Darren Newsom, Senior Market Advisor at Bar Chart. Thanks for talking with us this week.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, it's been a busy week for Greg Solier watching those maps and charts as it relates to weather. And Greg, what are you expecting to see this next week in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, continuation of the parade of weather systems, as you would expect for this point in about mid-autumn and early to mid-November. And we've seen moisture across the plains, including areas of the southern Rockies, the high plains of New Mexico, and West Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma in the form of some snow last week. And of course, the big rains across sections of the Corn Belt. In any event, another sizable, widespread, deep upper air trough, this U-shaped configuration. One weather system here north of Yellowstone that'll be darting off to the north and east. Windy, colder weather and lowering snow levels here. And then a new weather system offshore of the Pacific Northwest. So as we wind out of El Nino into a neutral state where we're at right now and then ramp up El Nino, more and more of these weather systems here to start. And then I think the focus shifts to the east and southeast deeper on into the wintertime season. Here's the next weather system out towards the Treasure Valley of Idaho with rain and snow in the Big Sky country, snow in the higher elevations of Colorado and points on southward, chilly rain back into the plains, and some clearing of the skies back into Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. So very little change and pretty much a typical mid-November look and feel out there into the Pacific Northwest. This is the southern reflection, as we call it, of this trough, this U-shaped configuration, and into the desert Southwest. Unless you can get this trough deeper and the low deeper into the Four Corners area, you're just going to kick up some wind, at least over the desert Southwest, to push some cooler air into the valleys of California. But yeah, maybe some severe weather. Boy, last week it was snow, and just east of that snow line, some severe weather may break out early to middle parts of the week across and on through the plains. That weather system darts to the north and northeast. Another one on its heels with some lowering snow levels as far south as New Mexico. Drought relief there, and showers and a couple of thunderstorms into the Red River Valley of the south on southward. So a more active weather pattern, Mike, and again, nibbling away at dryness and drought on the plains. plains.
Well, speaking of the Corn Belt, lots of big moisture events this past week. Greg, do you see a continuation of that as you look forward?
A little more progressive weather pattern, as in things move along and they don't train after one after another. Had 6 to 8 inches of rain in and around the St. Louis area, a swath of 1 to 5 into parts of northwest Indiana, east central and central Illinois, northwest and southeast. So that was more garden variety, so we still have work to go. But speaking of work, you've made some pretty good progress out there. Not much in the way of any standing corn and beans out across the Corn Belt. Here's the next weather system. Showers and thunderstorms, western Corn Belt, eastern plains, a push of some colder air, a little snow and rain mix out towards the Black Hills, and points on westward. That weather system darts out of the east by the late portion of the week. Colder weather to the north, more seasonal across the middle part of the country, warmth bound to the south and southwest, and overall, again, pretty typical November setup and some ample opportunities for additional moisture across and in through the Corn Belt locales. This, as we have been talking about on the 4-week and the longer range stuff here for weeks, if not months, is another tropical system, Raphael, tapping into the Gulf Coast area with this weather system in through the heart of cotton country. There's heat south and southwest of the Rio Grande, showers and thunderstorms back through the Delta and parts of the mid-south where the rain is actually needed. Windy, cooler, drier weather moving in from Kansas on southward later on into the week.
Do you think next week's action continues all the way to the eastern seaboard, Greg?
It will, but again, not the recurring heavy-natured moisture pattern. But again, some areas of the Corn Belt are wet, but there's just maybe single-digit amounts of corn and soybeans in those corn and soybean fields. So again, some delay, but otherwise some pretty good progress in getting moisture back into the fields. Here we go with one weather system, cool, dry weather for the northeast and New England. Weather system moves to the north and northeast. Good coverage showers and some thunderstorms for New England. I'll wrap around to some windy, colder weather, not bitter and not long lasting for the Great Lakes region to the Ohio Valley, back into the November sunshine, dry weather, and maybe some thaw-free cycles out there across parts of the Corn Belt and the plains. But again, pretty much opportunities for outdoor work are back into play. Here's the remnants, or at least some degree of Raphael, and that will get absorbed with the southwest to northeast jet stream winds. And so the moisture picks up across the Gulf Coast, parts of the Delta region. One piece of Raphael slides to the south and southeast. Here's what we think is the remnant circulation, at least the moisture source across the Carolinas. So this will probably impact ongoing cleanup and recovery from the hurricane situation a few weeks ago. Showers and thunderstorms across Florida, back into cooler, drier weather from the Mississippi on westward later in the week.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Thanks for joining us today for This Week in Agribusiness. Over the past several years, we've heard from airlines calling for a new lower carbon solution to fuel their planes. And that enthusiasm has been reflected in agriculture over the growth of sustainable aviation fuel. Well, SAF and biofuels could be an important component of farmers' marketing going forward, but we wanted to check in on how that industry is developing. To do that this week, we're talking with Jackie Fatka. She's the lead economist for farm supply and biofuels over at CoBank. And Jackie, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Good to be with you today.
Let's get the scoop on sustainable aviation fuel right off the bat. We've heard a lot about it. There have been a lot of headlines about it, Jackie. Are we actually making any sustainable aviation fuel?
You know, we are making a little, and we're seeing a little bit of progress. But when you look at the goal that was set in 2021, which was 3 billion gallons by 2030. If you look at what was in 2021, that was 5 million gallons that was being made. We're up to about 10 times that now, so a little bit more, but that's still 52 million gallons. So really just a drop in the bucket when you look at that big goal of 3 billion gallons. But you do see some exciting things happening there in the Chicago area. There's been a new announcement with Chicago Midway and Southwest Airlines to have some SAF. We've seen some agreements with camelina producers and providing SAF to the Minneapolis and Detroit airports. So we're starting to see a little momentum, but unfortunately right now when the ag sector is really needing a new big demand base, this is going to take some time for SAF to really take off.
Oh, very clever. It's going to take time to take off. I appreciate that, Jackie. And as you think about what we're making SAF out of, there have been a number of segments of ag that are excited. Soy oil, of course, is exciting. Alcohol to jet from the corn ethanol side. You mentioned camelina. What crops are we making SAF out of today?
Most is really in the HEFA process, which is also the same type of oil feedstocks that would be used for renewable diesel and even some biodiesel. So those, you mentioned soy oil, you mentioned camelina oil, canola oil, used cooking oil, tallow. Most of the SAF is within the HEFA process. We do have some pilot plants that are expanding, and we are seeing some movement in that direction with the alcohol to jet, but it's actually more expensive to do the alcohol to jet. And so most of what's happening today is in that HEFA process, which would use those soy oil, those other oil feedstocks. And you can shift back and forth. A lot of these renewable diesel plants can actually toggle back and forth between SAF and renewable diesel because they use the same feedstocks. And so the ability of those RD plants to switch to SAF can be turned on and off as the market moves that direction. But right now, it's actually more profitable for those plants to produce RD. And most of that's because renewable diesel is going out into the California market.
So there is a buyer for that already. They're paying that premium for that less carbon renewable diesel. Jackie, I want to come back to those other oils that are being used as feedstocks. The enthusiasm over SAF biofuel 2.0 going forward was coming from that demand for that soybean oil, that alcohol to jet. I'm hearing a lot about imports coming in, waste cooking oil, tallow from overseas. How big of an impact is that really having on this market?
There's a lot of concern in the industry with these used cooking oil and tallow imports that are being used within that HEFA feedstock to produce renewable diesel and potentially SAF. We've seen really big increases of that, but we've also seen increases in soy oil. So I would say it's not necessarily displacing soy oil, but it's creating more competition. And so maybe dampening some of the outlook that we had originally had with soy oil taking a bigger piece of that pie. And now we're seeing some increased competition from China. Now, as China builds up its own SAF market, we won't have as much of China's UCO coming in here because they're going to start to use that as much there. So again, right now we're playing some of this out, but I don't necessarily see that happening long term. But again, that's the market today, and also putting a little damper on the future of expansion in the renewable diesel market because of some of those imports coming in. And again, that's going to build on this 45Z, which is part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is also something that's supposed to start come next year and would be encouraging the domestic production of fuels. So we're going to wait and see how those imports would be treated underneath that guidance.
So we're still waiting on that. Treasury's supposed to make that announcement, and their rules are supposed to go into effect January 1st. TBD as to whether or not that will happen. Jackie, on the non-sustainable aviation fuels front, just conventional biofuels front, there was a lot of push for carbon capture and sequestration here over the past few years. Saw a few of those maybe to take a back seat here during this past election. Is that CCUS necessary to keep ethanol competitive long term?
I really think, South Dakota is what you were implying, the Carbon Summit pipeline that's supposed to take really the bulk of all those plants in Northeast Iowa, in Minnesota, Northwest Iowa, Minnesota, through South Dakota up to North Dakota to be able to pump it down below the ground there. But South Dakota farmers on the ballot voted that down, and the Summit pipeline has not given up that they're going to keep it going, but they definitely are delaying that. And I do really see that as an important viability for a lot of those plants. There is another plant that's being considered in Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, called the Trailblazer one, which would be reinventing or repurposing a previous natural gas pipeline to be able to pump from some of those. And again, to be able to capture some of these lower sustainable emissions goals, they're going to probably need some of those pipelines to do that.
All right, lots to watch, more political headaches ahead. Jackie Fack, lead economist for Farm Supply and Biofuels, thanks for joining us this week.
So much, Mike. Great to talk with you.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Poultry farmers over the last couple of years have had to think long and hard about their biosecurity practices and making sure that they're top tier. There are a lot of tools to do that on the market, and joining me this week to discuss one of them is Mike Newland. He's the Director of Agriculture Business Development with the Propane Education and Research Council. And Mike, we're going to talk about propane sterilization of poultry houses. Can you tell us how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, I guess the tools available with propane are products from a company in Kansas. Flame Engineering produces a product that's a hooded product. We have an open flame powered by propane underneath that hood. Essentially, it's on a 3-point hitch. You're pulling it through the house and really sterilizing the litter that's there. We're controlling the bacteria, the viruses, all the things that traditional chemistries would really try to fight.
And rather than treating it with chemicals, we're just heating it up so that it's sterilized.
We absolutely are. We think there's some benefits. Obviously, we're not building resistance to any chemicals that are being used within the house, so I think that's critical. Also, we don't have any residue left over, so gosh, if you're going to put brand new birds in there, we don't want the possibility of them being exposed to anything, and this application, this process really eliminates that possibility.
So now, why would you use propane in this particular application? How does propane perform the best versus other options?
Yeah, it's incredibly high BTU content. It's clean. We use propane all over the country on indoor settings, so forklifts and warehouses. We're burning it inside your home, but it gets vented to the outside. But it's the cleanest fuel that's commercially available. So we feel very comfortable anytime we can use propane on an indoor application. So that's the really key component. It does have high BTU content. It's readily available, for all those reasons.
And cost, Mike, let me ask you about that. That's always a concern for folks in the ag industry. Using a tool like this, how does it compare to other chemical treatments, perhaps?
Yeah, I think you're going to find some savings over those chemical treatments. We think it's a better solution long-term for you than the chemistry, and it's going to save you some money in the long run.
The lack of residual, the lack of any chemical left on the surfaces certainly makes it seem appealing, particularly for those young chicks.
Anything we can do to get those birds started the right way and growing fast so there's not a setback right in the beginning is beneficial. So we think it's a huge positive, and we think folks around the country should really take a hard look at it.
Now, if they've not yet looked at sanitization using propane, Mike, can they learn more online?
They can. 2 places. I'd encourage them to go to our website, propane.com, but I'd also have them look up the folks that are making the tools, Flame Engineering, as I mentioned. I think they're in Kansas.
Mike Newland, Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg mentioned next week looks to be active from a weather perspective. Greg, who's going to see the bulk of the moisture?
Once again, on through the plains, across a good part of the Corn Belt, hopefully away and removed from some of those excessive rainfall numbers. But I'm sure a lot of that got absorbed and percolated into the soils here last week with another wide swath of 1 to perhaps 2 inches across the plains through the Corn Belt locales. Of course, there's still cleanup and recovery from the Carolinas back on southward into parts of cotton country. We've got to keep an eye on Raphael. We think it'll be a drift here with time to the east and northeast, but still maybe some half-foot rain potential along the Gulf Coast. Here's the rain snow line back as far south as western Kansas. You'll see the whole gambit between snow and maybe severe weather off to the east as the week wears on, and some pretty good moisture for the northern Rockies into the Pacific Northwest, putting some snow in those Cascades for runoff, Mike, later on next springtime.
Greg, the week of November 18th, what did the temperatures start to look like?
Overall, we continue with a very warm, almost September to October look and feel with much above on temperatures here. We've set records across parts of the Corn Belt for overnight lows that were warmer than average and record setting on average as well. So that's probably the story here. Note the trough, the deep one across the western states, readings a few degrees below average here, but you know the drill. Anytime you get this range of temperatures over a given distance, you come up with a pretty active weather pattern as systems drop in across the central valleys into the desert southwest. They lift quickly to the north and northeast and look at the wide and expansive shield of moisture. And I don't care if we're closing in on Thanksgiving, a busy weather pattern still in the tropics over sections of the southeastern states. So no shortage of moisture, Mike, as we wind our way through the last week or so of the month of November.
Now, of course, that week of November 25th is Thanksgiving. Greg, what do we need to be watching for weather-wise?
From a temperature standpoint here, no real harsh cold. Temperatures are a bit below average all the way down down into the desert Southwest. Some warmth into the eastern half of the country by and large. Probably crack open that kitchen window with the bird in the oven, and temperatures are more normal up and down the eastern seaboard. From a travel standpoint, looks like any potential for winter issues would be through the northern plains, Pacific Northwest. This will be all rain. Parts of Texas, the southeastern states, up the eastern seaboard, and we're still dealing with some semblance of tropical rains across the immediate Gulf Coast areas. So for Thanksgiving and the end of November, nothing too harsh, and we continue to put moisture back in the soils.
As we get into that first week of December, Greg, do the temperatures start to feel winter-like?
Not really. I mean, we get a quick little jab of some cooler air, and that's about really the way it's going to go here till we get probably closer to the holidays and into the new year as we ramp up this La Nina setup. And then the weather will become a little more character building with winter in mind, but pushes some cooler air over the middle part of the country. Warmth gets suppressed across the southeastern states, across the western reaches of the country, and the last of the organized moisture from the Corn Belt in the eastern states. And we keep an eye on the tropical Atlantic as well.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of versatile high-speed discs and achieve better results with every pass. Visit Brandt.ca for more. It was a busy week in the markets with the election, the Federal Reserve meeting, and on Friday, we got 2 reports from the USDA. Joining us now to talk about them is Bruce Blythe. He's the senior editor over at Farm Futures. And Bruce, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we did see those 2 reports come out from the USDA on Friday. Bruce, are these November reports typically market movers?
The November crop production report historically has been a market mover. This year, things are a little bit different. I think it's this is the last crop production report of the calendar year for corn and soybeans. The next one isn't until January when the USDA puts out its final numbers. This year, however, I think it's being upstaged a bit by the election, of course, and other things going on in the market, like the Fed meeting. So this year, we're probably not looking at as much drama as you might typically find or get with these reports. There's only marginal changes expected in this month's report for both corn and soybean production. Harvest pace has been historically fast. We've had the fastest soybean harvest in about 15 years. So the USDA should have ample amounts of data. They should have a good handle on the size of this year's harvest. We're expecting only modest declines in both corn and soybean production, about 14 million bushels of corn to 15.189 billion bushels is the average analyst estimate. That would still be the second biggest corn crop on record. For soybeans, we're looking at a downward revision of 25 million bushels to 4.557 billion bushels based on analyst estimates. Still a record soybean crop. So we get anything widely divergent from those numbers, you could see some market movement. But as it stands, this report may not pack as big a punch as it usually does in past years.
All right, that certainly makes sense, given that exceptionally fast pace of harvest across the Corn Belt. Bruce, real quick before we let you go, the WASDE report, World Supply and Demand Estimates, any major changes expected there on this month?
Well, not particularly major changes expected. We might see some slight downward revisions in the global ending stocks for wheat, corn, and soybeans. I think the traders will also be watching the South American crop estimates. Brazil is expected to produce a record soybean harvest this year, or next year rather. But I'm guessing there won't be major changes in those numbers as well. So this month's WASDE may not also bring much trauma either. But we'll still be watching these numbers closely. And we will have a breakdown and analysis of both of these reports on Farm Futures Friday morning, soon after the reports come out at 11 a.m. Central.
Absolutely. You can always find up-to-the-minute reporting of the commodity market news at farmfutures.com. Bruce, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. And the Tractor Shed this weekend, some holiday giving ideas for that tractor person that needs a gift from you. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. The holidays are coming fast. You might want to order something for holiday gift giving. And no matter how much I love having all of that information at the palm of my hand and the device, I do still like looking at tractor magazines. And I bet somebody you know does too. To spread out those pages, look at the photographs, let me give you some suggestions for holiday giving. There is Heritage Iron Magazine, the Muscle Tractor Magazine. Sherry Schaefer has put this magazine out for years. Every brand, every make, every model of the muscle tractors from 1960 to the 1990 era. HeritageIron.com is the website. Sherry, for 20 years, has also put out Oliver Heritage Magazine. 6 issues a year. You can get 2 years for $60 at OliverHeritage.com. One of my favorites also is Red Power Magazine. They focus on the farm equipment, construction equipment, the trucks and the toys of International Harvester. Dennis and Sally do a great job with that magazine. RedPowerMagazine.com. And yes, for the John Deere folks, there's Green Magazine. They've been printing for 30 years, greenmagazine.com. They also sell a calendar. And Antique Power Magazine bills itself as the world's largest antique tractor magazine with a circulation of 51,000 plus. 6 issues a year, all makes and models, antiquepower.com. Mark Stock joins us again this weekend to fill us in on what's selling in the week ahead at Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. At Big Iron, we post all of our auction results. So if you have a specific make and model of a machine you are interested in learning how they have been selling on an auction, go to Big Iron, register, log in, and click auction results. Then in the search box, type in the item you're looking for. On Monday, November the 11th, the Sullivan Collector Car Sale features some unbelievable restored and original automobiles. On Tuesday, November the 12th, the Judy Thompson Retirement Sale will take place by Bethany, Illinois, featuring a John Deere 9570 Combine. Also on November 12th, Nefco from Avon, Illinois will sell 554 items. This is an antique and collector tractor auction. On Wednesday, November the 13th, Bert and Kathy Neff are retiring from Mayfield, Kansas. Their sale features a Ford Versatile 976 Designation 6 four-wheel drive tractor. John Taylor in Rising Star, Texas will sell a 2020 John Deere 8RX 370 quad-track tractor. PNC Vendor Finance LLC will sell a 2020 JCB 8330 fast-track tractor located in California. Max, there's Land and Machinery and Livestock selling almost every day in the month of November, and our December is filling up fast. Please reach out to your Big Iron or Sullivan auctioneer rep to get your auction scheduled.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're getting to know Carter Boyd. He's serving as the Ohio State FFA's vice president this year. And Carter, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here.
So now you are from Southern Ohio, the town of Hillsboro. Fill us in. What's agriculture like outside Hillsboro?
So agriculture back home means a lot of different things. A lot of row crop, a lot of livestock production. But the way I kind of got started in agriculture is with my grandparents and my family back home. They got me interested in showing beef cattle, which I've been lucky enough to do across the nation year round. And another part of my life in agriculture kind of goes back to my family businesses we have back home. We have a forestry business that's kind of different look on agriculture they don't see much of back home. That's a pretty notable part of my life too. So.
That is fantastic. Carter, now what was it that made you want to be a part of FFA when you were in high school?
So as you can, I'm sure, already tell, family is a big part of my life, just like a lot of small town kids back home. And that's really no exception within the FFA realm of things. My grandparents and parents alike, as well as many other family members, were part of the FFA. And I can remember back to my earliest memories of holidays and Christmas gatherings, and busting out their old blue jackets and hearing all their stories. It was something I was really excited to get my hands on once I got into high school. And honestly, probably been one of my most enjoyable experiences, whether it be at the chapter level, the state level, or even go to the national convention, is getting to share those experiences with my family but also take time to make FFA my own path and make my own unique waves in the industry.
You know, you can hear the passion for the service in your voice. Carter, long term, do you hope to stay in the ag industry?
I do. Those family businesses that I mentioned earlier are really, really important to me. And I love to go back to those once I graduate college. I hope to pursue a business administration degree or ag business degree, kind of still deciding on that as I'm still a senior in high school. But I want to go back and help with those forestry businesses and other ag parts.
Fantastic. Carter, well, we wish you the best of luck. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us this week.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by PTx, a new brand from AGCO that includes precision ag technologies from Precision Planting and PTx Trimble. Well, Chad Colby has friends all over the country, and those friends allow Mr. Colby to get into things that regular folks like you and I just can't attend. And in fact, this week, he's touring an event which only exhibitors can tour, but Chad's got the inside scoop.
If you're an automotive enthusiast, oh my goodness, this will be one of your favorite tech segments. Hi everyone, guess where I'm at this week? I'm in Las Vegas at the Las Vegas Convention Center, the home of SEMA. And if you haven't ever heard of SEMA, SEMA is one of the largest automotive shows in the world. Anything to do with automotive is here. Now obviously there's a lot of things to talk about. You can see here behind me, Ford Performance. Of course, they're going to have all their performance stuff there, including hot rod engines and go fast parts, which was awesome to see. As we walked around the show this week, I saw a lot of things that got my attention. The first was probably Milwaukee Tools. I had never seen a display like that, and it was really set up where you could go test the tools. Whether that's changing lug nuts on a tire, they actually had front clips of a car where you could use their different hand tools and work on them there in real time, right there. They also had a fender set up where you could sand on it. It was really interesting. You may not know this. Tesla does not have service centers. They bring the service to you. And as my wife and I were walking through the show, we saw a van, and I pointed out to her, look at the back of this van. It's set up for mobile service. And I wonder if that could be something more in ag that we do. It was interesting. It had oil equipment in it, and in the inside, they had the ability to change tires, which was kind of interesting. Inside, bringing it to you or to the farm. As we walked around, we saw a lot of other things, a lot of automation and paint, and the more we walked around, the more neat things we've ever seen. And for myself personally, the only time I'd ever seen SEMA was in a magazine, and it was a real treat to be here and see some of this cool technology here myself. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad, as always. But folks, you know, technology isn't just coming for cars and things on wheels, it's also coming to farm accounting software, and we'll have that when we return. Well, folks, with the combines put away and harvest wrapping up, farmers now are looking at office season, turning to many tasks that some have perhaps been putting off and don't enjoy. But it's not the end of the world to make those tasks easier. Joining me right now is Brian Stark. He is the co-founder and product marketing director with Traction Ag. Brian, thanks for talking with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What is Traction Ag?
So Traction Ag is a cloud-based farm accounting software system, and it also pulls in a lot of other types of data into one software solution. So that way farmers can spend less time in the office and more time out in the field.
That's fascinating. Brian, how long has Traction been around? Can you fill us in?
Yeah, so the co-founders of Traction, so our history goes all the way back to the 1990s with a software system called FarmWorks. So FarmWorks was very popular at that time, but the thing about FarmWorks, it was desktop based, right? So as you know, technology has changed over time, and that's a good thing. Farmers have phones, tablets, and things that they're carrying with them, and so the expectation really is to have software that they can really leverage any device. So that's exactly what we've created at Traction, is really one central hub that has all your accounting, field operations, things that they need to know.
All right. Now, I've heard Traction Ag referred to as the QuickBooks for farmers. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of my conversations with farmers start with, hey, I'm using QuickBooks. I have spreadsheets. I have all these things going on. So our software, it's not going to work just like QuickBooks, but there's some similarities to it. However, there's quite a few differences as well, such as the ability to track inventory, to know your products and know how much you have on hand. You might want to look at your bins and be able to see how much bushels you have left. Schedule F. We actually had one customer, she's working on 1099s right now, right? It's that time of year. And she spent 2 to 3 days managing all that data, right? With Traction, it cut it down to 1 to 2 hours.
Wow.
So, and also I think one of our sweet spots of that software that really separates us again from QuickBooks is the ability to really narrow it down to the field level, to track the profitability per field, per crop. And really, in today's economy, you got to know where those numbers are going.
Absolutely. It's built for the farmer. Now, with tax season around the corner, Brian, what type of things are you doing to help farmers better prepare?
Yeah, we got a couple of things. The first thing would be some free resources on our website at tractionag.com. We have a year-end tax planning PDF that you can download. You don't have to be a Traction customer to take advantage of that, but that's a nice checklist to kind of go through and make sure you got the right reports and things for the accountant meeting before year end. We also, within the application itself, I think it's important to point out that you have the ability to share the account with the accountant. So if you want to tag team it with your accountant, or maybe it's a banker that you want to share it with, you have the ability to do that, and you have also, you can take that permission away, and really that feature is available for any person that you want to share to.
Gets everybody on that same page.
Teamwork.
Brian, for folks who want to explore Traction Ag, where would you send them?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of things. You can go to our website, tractionag.com. There's a free trial there that you can start. You can also do a quick meeting if you want to just kind of go through the software. But the trial is really the key thing. And with the year end approaching, now is the best time to get in there and just experiment, give it a test drive.
Tractionag.com. Brian Stark, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for joining us here. Be sure to catch us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.